The party that promised South Africans clean leadership and no excuses is now facing its own internal chaos, and voters are starting to notice. Welcome to Political Pulse. Keep your pulse on the nation. Today, we're talking about the Democratic Alliance, a party that built its brand on competence and accountability, but is now battling serious questions about credibility. Before we continue, hit like so more people can hear this conversation. Let's be honest for a moment. The Democratic Alliance is starting to sound like the very thing it promised South Africans it would never become. For years, the DA sold itself as the clean, stable, and competent alternative to the ANC. No corruption, no chaos, no excuses, just delivery. That was the brand. That was the promise. But as we move closer to important local government elections, that image is starting to crack. And these cracks are no longer small or easy to ignore. At the center of the latest storm is DA leader John Steenhuisen, now serving as Minister of Agriculture. His department is under pressure over animal disease control, vaccine shortages, and biosecurity failures. Farmers are worried. People in the industry are asking serious questions. Then Steenhuisen says vaccines are not a silver bullet. Now, on paper, that statement is true. Vaccines alone don't fix everything. But politics is not only about being technically correct. It's about leadership. It's about giving people confidence. It's about showing you have a clear plan. For farmers facing losses and uncertainty, that comment didn't sound reassuring. It sounded like an excuse. And that's where the real problem begins. Because this is the same DA that spent years attacking ANC ministers for making excuses instead of delivering. When the DA was in opposition, it demanded accountability. Now that it holds power, it's asking for patience. That contradiction is hard to miss.
They've given us the bank details of 4 weeks ago. They've given us the bank details of John Steenhuisen. And they showed us how John Steenhuisen buying on the thing. I said to John Steenhuisen, I've got your bank details. I'm not going to use that against you. Because ons word nie gebruik in die PA om DA fights te fight. You're not going to use me. I told John Steenhuisen.
Then came the real shock. Deon George, a senior DA figure, resigns. And he doesn't leave quietly. He leaves with explosive claims, accusing the party leadership of being compromised. He even suggests that Steenhuisen himself is captured by the ANC. That is not a small accusation. That hits at the very heart of what the DA claims to stand for. For years, the DA positioned itself as the strongest barrier against ANC corruption and state capture. That was its biggest selling point. Now, one of its own senior insiders is openly questioning whether that story is still true, even if you don't believe every claim Deon George makes.
Partner parties, but it's often very useful to have a reserve outside that if your partner party gives you a lot of trouble inside the coalition, you can have plan B. That's what I learned very much during the coalitions that I managed. However, when we signed the statement of intent, which was in itself a huge education for me, Clause 24 said that the original signatories to the statement of intent would have to be agreed amongst themselves before new people could join this government of national unity. And that was in Clause 24. If you read it, I haven't got the word for word in my head, but it basically says, for the people who agree to come into this, and that's when we signed it, if any people are added, or if any parties are added, it'll have to be in consultation with each other. And at that time, and at the time that we elected President Ramaphosa as president of the country, because that was when the statement of intent became operable, there were three founding parties. There was the DA, there was the ANC, and there was the Inkatha Freedom Party. Within 4 or 5 days, the president was announcing all sorts of other people who joined, without any respect for Clause 24, as if it didn't exist. And I could only conclude to myself, either they couldn't care that it exists, or they don't know that it exists, or they're doing whatever they want anyway. And that was our first huge red light, that the ANC wasn't taking this seriously and was just continuing as if they could call the shots entirely. And you may remember that I was on television with Fikile and Balula, and I pointed this out to him, and a lot of people didn't like that I did point it out to him, of course. So, the only parties that can actually bring down the government are the DA and the ANC. Every other party in the government is there by grace and favour of President Ramaphosa. And if you are a minister or a deputy minister or a chair of a committee or whatever it is you are, you have to please President Ramaphosa because he is the person who holds your fate in his hands. And of course, that's why the ANC wants a whole lot of smaller parties, because then they have a little hallelujah chorus that supports them on everything that they do. And it's very convenient with the ANC not always to have to fight with us. They get their proxies to fight with us. And then it looks different. But their proxies, of course, are going to side with the ANC, no matter what they said in the election, because Ramaphosa can relieve them from their positions.
But here is the uncomfortable truth the DA now faces. Being better than the ANC is no longer enough. Voters want proof, not slogans. Consistency, not clever messaging. Accountability, not internal warfare. You cannot campaign on stability while your leadership is visibly divided. You cannot claim the moral high ground while former insiders accuse you of the very failures you condemn in others. As local elections approach, the real question voters must answer is no longer whether the DA is better than the ANC. It is whether the DA is still honest about who it really is. If this breakdown helped you see the bigger picture, hit like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Political Pulse. Keep your pulse on the nation.